All right, you maggots, listen up. Now, I really didn't feel like doing this video, but it's been bouncing around in my head. I was watching somebody else's video, and they were repairing some radios, and they were modern radios, and they were talking about the quality of the radio, how well it would work. And then they took them out in the desert, and they didn't perform like they expected them to. Now, I can tell you, I've told you once before, I can tell you how good a radio is going to work just by looking at the schematic. There are certain things in a long distance AM radio or a DX AM broadcast radio that you have to have most of the time. All right, there is an exception to the rule, and one of the exceptions to the rule is this Sony. All right, this comes in prison version, which would be clear. This is a $9 radio. The IF for this radio is not 455. It's in long wave, and a couple different tricks. This thing really picks up AM broadcast that's far away really well. But it's got a slide wheel dial. It's got a gear inside. It's stupid as far as DXing. You know, you can get the station, but there's so much play in the dial, it makes you crazy. Now, there's people that have taken this apart, and I see if I can give you a part number on this thing. You probably can get one on eBay used. Let's see if it's even got a model number on it. Let me get my flashlight. Let me make sure the camera is still in focus. Okay. These videos are not easy to do. Does it have a model? Yeah, it's a Walkman SRF-59. Walkman SRF-59, and it's a Sony. If you're into AMDX radios, you might want to have one of these as just a collectible. You can get it for about $9. Now, this radio, I don't know what's in this one. Never looked at the schematic. Somebody was describing that Sony that I just showed you, and someone says this radio works better at DXing than that other one, and it's digital. So I had to buy it, and it does. This is the exception to the rule. Now I'll give you, this is a Sangean. I'll give you the part number. It's DT-210. All right. This is my go-to radio for hunting down noises on AM, and it's also one of my power out radios. If the power fails, I throw 2 batteries in this, and I use this. This does a really good job on FM. It's really good DXing AM because it's got a digital readout, and you can leave the readout on because it's LCD. All right, so these two I just showed you, they're the exception to the rules. Most of the AM radios nowadays, they're total crap. They got a build of them like an SDR, and you know how I hate SDR radios. So anyway, this guy, he fixes these radios and he takes them out to the desert, and he had an SDR, and it was a Russian-made SDR, and he put a really long wire on it, and it still wouldn't get, it got I think 1 station. All right, now let me tell you what's inside both a tube radio and a transistor radio. This radio right here, this is a Radio Shack long distance AM radio, the early model. It's a little bit different. It doesn't have the crystal filter, the 455 crystal filter, but the front end is the same. And you have to have certain things to make a really great AMDX radio, and it goes for a tube radio also. This is nothing more than them emulating a great tube radio. Now, the first thing you got to have on transistor radio is, let me make sure this is in focus, a nice honking ferret rod antenna. And besides being an antenna, this coil up here is tied to this capacitor. This capacitor is a 3-section capacitor. So when you tune this radio to a station, this ferret rod resonates at that frequency. The signal comes down, it goes to, say, a FET or a transistor. Then the output goes to another, it looks like an IF can or an oscillator can, but it's not. So the signal comes in, gets amplified, goes through this. This can tunes along with this tuning cap. So these two tune to the station, all right? At the same time, this third section of this tuning capacitor tunes this oscillator coil mixer area. So you have a tuned RF front end. So a lot of radios, or not a lot, some of them call it a TRF radio, tuned radio frequency. And original radios, when they come out, tube radios, they didn't have an oscillator in them. You tuned 3 sections to the station, and each section was amplified, and then it went to your detector, and that was called a TRF radio. But TRF radios were great if there's only one station on the band that you wanted to get. As the band became more crowded, the TRF radios were wider, and they would get two or 3 stations at the same time. And that's when they started adding the oscillator mixer. And that every time you mix, heterodyne and mix a signal, the resultant signal comes out more narrow. And that's how you get your selectivity. Remember, sensitivity is the ability to get the station. Selectivity is the ability to get that weak station while there's a strong one nearby next to it in frequency. So the selectivity, you have to have a certain amount of selectivity. Too much selectivity ruins your audio. Your audio gets muddy. You lose your fidelity. All right. So anyway, so Radio Shack came out with this radio, and GE at the same time has a super radio. There's a bunch of super radios. They have a honking big RF a ferrite rod antenna. They have amplified after the rod antenna. It gets amplified. It then goes through a second second coil, which is tuned to that frequency, and that adds not filterization. It adds filtering, and it gets rid of noise. It fixes the signal to noise ratio for you. Now, yesterday I was reading on one of the comments. The person said to the person, "It's not microvolt sensitivity; it's millivolt." I thought it was microvolt. I looked it up real quick on an R71A. It's microvolt. The amount of signal coming into the antenna is microvolt. And but I don't know. I don't want to argue. That's why I want to get out of this hobby. You got so many people in it that don't know what the fuck they're talking about. It really annoys me. Now, remember I said a tube radio is very similar to this, a kitchen radio. You have that big loop, but a kitchen radio doesn't have the front end RF amp. It goes right in. The loop on the back of the radio is part of the local oscillator. They dump it right in. There's no amplification. That's why an All-American 5 radio sucks for DXing. It's missing an IF. It doesn't have 3 IFs. Notice this one's got 3 IFs. You know, you gotta triple tune the front end, or let's say double tune it, and then you got your oscillator, and then you gotta have some amplification for the IF. And you don't want to bring it up real fast, because then you'll have overloading problems, and then your AGC circuit gets all wacky, weird. There's a certain way to make an AMDX radio, and this is it. And I mentioned super radios again. Now behind me, right here, this is a Hallicrafters SX42, and it's got a triple tuned front end. It has 2 amplifier tubes in the front end before we go to the mixer. Now, it doesn't have a rod antenna, all right? What it has is it's got a tune coil that works off the main capacitor, and then your piece of wire antenna goes into that. So that emulates this, and this emulates that. This was a big breakthrough when they started using ferrite rod antennas for transistor radios, because it made the antenna much more compact. So that's it. So you can go look at the schematic of something like this, and then go look at the schematic of an SDR, and there's no front end. They just bring the signals in. Once the signals are in the radio, and you haven't selected them with coils and that, it's over with. You really you're really limited to what you can do. Now, the guy took the SDR. It's a Russian one. It's one of the better models, more expensive one. Took it out to the desert, and he put I think a 30-foot or more wire on it, and it didn't do dick. Okay? And I'm sitting there going, you got to be kidding me. He didn't know that? I was like, oh, man. See, I get in fights with people over SDRs. They leave nasty comments. They're shit. They do a bunch of different frequencies badly. In other words, there was people that bought the SDRs, and they say, it doesn't work as good as my scanner. Well, go look at what's in an SDR, and go look at the schematic for your scanner. And the scanner's got all kinds of tuned coils, and those are not there for the fun of it. And over the years, I told you, they make radios cheaper and cheaper and cheaper because the public is stupid. It's lipstick on a pig. You give them a nice cabinet on a stereo radio, and they bring it home. My father did that. He had an Admiral unit that my uncle got him. My uncle worked at Admiral, and he put it in a cabinet. Before that, he had a homemade one. Took the homemade one, took it out, put the Admiral one in there, and the Admiral one wasn't as good as the one he took out. Then after my mother died, he wanted a really good stereo system. So we went to an audio store, and he went cheap, and he ended up bringing home a radio that was cheaper than the Admiral that he had. He went by the cabinet. So he complained to me it wouldn't do this, it wouldn't do that. And then finally, I kept telling him, stop hooking it to an outside antenna, because if we get a lightning storm nearby, it's going to blow the front end out, and that radio, we can't get a schematic for it. Was such a piece of junk. And that's what happened. And then I guess it got hit by lightning. Yeah, the voices that I do, some of them are my mother, and some of them are my father. You would warn them, and they would still do it. And then they'd want me to know how to fix it, and I would fix it. My mother used to water the television all the time. And you say, what? Well, she hung plants over the TVs in the house. She would water them. The water would come through this plant and go into the television set. And then she'd think it was so simple just to fix the television after that. So anyway, I got all these phantoms in my brain here, voices. As I'm doing this video, I'm getting flashbacks of all the stupid stuff that people did, and all the wasted time I've argued with idiots. Right? But if you want a DXAM, you need a good antenna on a tube radio with the front tuned coil. Then that goes and gets amplified, and then it gets filtered, and then it goes to your local oscillator mixer, and that's what you got to have. And those other radios I showed you, they're exceptions to the rules. They're using some trick circuitry, and that's all I really wanted to tell you. I'm sorry about the flashbacks. See, I get those. I was around people that I didn't realize how stupid they were until you get time to think about it. And you would constantly say, don't do that because this is going to happen. And then someone would say, I was trying something. And then my mistake was not to say to them, well, you're going to have to buy a new one. And then let them whine and kick and scream. But I used to fix it and they'd do something stupid again. Yeah. And that's what you have to understand about me, is I had people around me that thought what I was doing was so simple compared to their lives, and it wasn't. And then they put the stupidity in there. Like one guy with a car, 3 times I got it running for him with a new wiring harness, and I said to him, tie it up so it don't burn like and he'd go out for a ride with it, and the wiring harness would slip down on the motor, and he'd burn the wiring harness 3 times. The motorcycle guy that put the motorcycles together forgot the connector under the gas tank 20 times, and I could tell if he forgot that connector by measuring from the headlight down to the battery. I actually come up with a method that before he had to take the gas tank off the motorcycle, which took a while, I could tell him he forgot the connector. And the reason he was constantly taking the gas tank off the motorcycle, was his dog used to piss on the motorcycle and kick it over. And then he'd give it to this other guy who was on the same receiving end as me. He kept repainting the gas tank for frickin' free, okay? So besides me going over there and troubleshooting the connector, he forgot to click, there was another guy repainting the motorcycle. Yeah, I was around a group of people that not the brightest bulbs in the string, as we say. And I didn't know. And I wanted to be friendly, and I had manners. But now I have regrets, as you can tell you. Like I was rambling again. Yeah, yeah. But I just want to tell you, I realized that this person didn't realize a radio, how good it's going to be before he took it out in the desert. And yeah, you go look. He just did the video the other day, and they're Russian radios, and they're very close to an SDR. You got a little bit of an amplifier off the antenna, and then it comes down to the mixer. You gotta filter this stuff. The quality, you can, when you filter it, you can amplify it more, and you get, anyway. You gotta have certain circuits. You can't. You can eliminate them if you're selling a pocket transistor radio for $5.95 at the local drugstore. And that's what they were shooting for, man. They weren't giving you a radio that was really good. And then there was a period of time there, they would say 15 transistors. And a lot of them were just in there. They were soldered in there. They weren't even working. And I had to put up with those kids in school. I was the radio guy all the way through school, all the way from kindergarten up, man. I was into radios, and they'd say to me, my radio's got 12 transistors. Meanwhile, my 6 transistor radio, because it had a long rod in it, was blowing the doors off. And all they were listening to was WMCA and WABC. And then the one guy kept saying, you know, WMCA drifts back and forth. It was his radio. And this is the people, and you try to explain to them that the one guy went to his house, his parents wanted to use walkie-talkies to talk to the people upstairs. And they told me the walkie-talkies didn't work. I took them home, the batteries were dead. I bought them back, and then what it was is they thought if you turned the walkie-talkie on and had it receiving, it wasn't using the batteries. It's only if you talked. Yeah, I was around these people. I have thousands of stories of stupid people, and I didn't realize that I should have cashed in on it. I was always doing favors for people. You got to cash in on it. If someone's wasting your time, time is money. I think that's it. All right, that's it.